Hello, and welcome back to the MRG, Magonia Research Group. This channel is devoted to Forteana and high strangeness in all its forms, including cryptozoology, the paranormal, and ufology. Right, this is going to be a one-take wonder. Come on, we're going to get through this. Right. Hello, folks. I thought that I would offer up something truly unique for all those who have chosen to stick around for the second upload. This is the weirdest and yet somehow most awesome conspiracy theory that I've ever heard. Could medieval knights have actually been non-human beings using their armour as exoskeletons? The short answer is no. The longer answer is a longer no. But today I'm going to be explaining where this preposterous idea came from and just what the arguments for it are, as well as showing beyond a shadow of a doubt that these arguments fall apart when examined closely. But first, I shall present you with the full history of this argument, as well as repeating the argument itself at face value. Please excuse the slew of pseudo-history that is about to come. The theory originally comes from LiveJournal, specifically a poster by the name of Mihail1704. Mihail raises several interesting points about the possible inhumanity of medieval knights, among which are the facts that they apparently were never to be seen outside of their suits of armour, even sometimes sleeping in them. Some knights would have eaten through their visors as well. They also rarely left their castles, and would demand married women as their mistresses. These mistresses would never physically come into contact with the knights, and would instead only present them with handkerchiefs used to wipe their maidenly tears. How romantic. Perhaps inhuman creatures were using this salty secretion as a source of food. Or maybe, just maybe, as Mihail suggests, could these tears have been genetic samples used by the creatures to create human clones? Also, one only needs to look at the shape of the helmets and armours used by the knights to see that it must surely have been impossible for a human to wear them and still function in battle, or to even see. There is a bizarre statue to be found in one of the Medici chapels in Florence, Italy. It is unclear to me who exactly created it, but it seems to be a real, ancient sculpture. It depicts a humanoid torso seemingly clad in a breastplate of the cuirass variety. However, instead of a head, it appears to have a small, worm-like creature poking up from its neck. Could this have been the true form of a medieval knight outside of their armour? Obviously, we're not talking here about all knights being inhuman, just some of them. We know the faces and identities of quite a few knights, and Mihail proposes that the knights who wore more revealing suits were human, whereas the knights who did not weren't. Also, it is interesting to note that knights were almost always of noble birth, and the term blue blood has been used to denote someone of noble birth. What if these worm-like creatures inside steel exoskeletons literally had blue blood, like that of horseshoe crabs? As well as the statues in the Medici chapels, there is this rather horrifying display, which allegedly depicts the King and Queen of Portugal from some point in history. There is no information I've been able to find about the provenance of this statue, or indeed if it is a real historical artifact at all. But if it is, then perhaps it's yet more evidence that knights and the rulers of the Middle Ages were in fact inhuman. Looking at the scales on the back of the coiled snake-like creatures on the statue, I wouldn't blame you if you thought of a dragon. Now, let's recontextualize the legends of knights fighting dragons, shall we? Dragons kidnap maidens, while the beings in knights' armour exercise restraint and only feed off the tears of the handkerchiefs. Perhaps these quote-unquote dragons were rogue members of the same species as knights, and the knights had to kill them to prevent their ghastly secret from escaping into the outside world. We can see the fusion of knightly and draconic features all across medieval artwork, such as in the case of the Zeteron of maritime folklore, as well as the sea knights found scattered all across the margins of various manuscripts. This one, for example, is from the 1480 Book of Hours of William, Lord of Hastings. Now, how would human knights have gone to the toilet inside these suits? Suits like this one clearly have no way for them to be removed in times of need. No. According to Mihail, servants would pour water into their master's suits to clean them. This seems highly ineffective. Like, great, now you're stuck inside a metal suit with your own urine and a load of freezing water. Mihail then even suggests that knights may have been dried out on fires. This seems wholly unfeasible. So why the thing with the water? Perhaps the worm-like creatures living inside the steel armour needed moist environments to survive. Seems perfectly reasonable to me. It is also intriguing, and disturbing in this context, to note that knights' servants were disallowed from ever seeing or touching their masters outside of their suits. It was almost as if these worm-like creatures were trying to cover up their non-human nature. I wonder if there are any accounts of knights being unable to talk. Speaking of, the descriptions given to knights in combat are positively bizarre. These, beings supposedly fought for days on end, not even stopping if one of their heads was cut off. A knight could only be killed if its opponent struck the sword down into the neck region of the suit, as was there. This definitely points towards knights being worm-like beings instead of humans. Also interesting is that the servants of a defeated knight would immediately transfer to the victor, almost as if they had seen something with their old masters, which could not be allowed to escape into the general public. Confused? Disturbed? Are they just horrified, any historians listening? Let me explain. That was a thought experiment. For a start, the armour on the right of the screen right now was not intended to be used in combat as you might think. Rather, you're looking at what's called a frog-mouth helm. These would have been worn by mounted knights for jousting tournaments in which they would have been leaning forward on their horses. This angled position meant that they would have been able to see through the slit-like mouths of their helmets. What you are looking at on the left, there we go, is Gothic plate armour, a type of armour made from articulated steel plates. It would have been made in the Holy Roman Empire during the 15th century. Suits like these would have weighed between 15 to 25 kilograms, and seeing as this weight was evenly spread out through the body, the knight within it would have remained quite agile, and could even jump. The bizarre spiked shoes shown on this suit may imply that this specific suit was used for jousting as opposed to actual combat. As should be clear by now, jousting armour and combat armour were very different, and conflating one with the other results in all sorts of funky misconceptions. Some of the other claims I've just made, to paraphrase our good friend Mikhail, are blatantly untrue. Knights would have put their suits, or at least some types of suits, on one piece by one piece, allowing for them to simply be taken off in the same way for them to go to the bathroom. This specific suit of armour is what's called tonlet armour, and it actually belonged to Henry VIII himself, who used it for jousting. This is one of the rare examples of armour which couldn't be taken off easily. The jousting armour was designed this way because of the lack of required mobility in the activity of jousting. The thing about the water being poured into the armour to clean it is findable nowhere else except the LiveJournal post. The LiveJournal post also provides a source, but that source is a review of a museum, so it contains nothing about pouring water into a suit. I can only conclude that the LiveJournal post must just be blatantly deceptive. Although absence of evidence isn't the same thing as evidence of absence, absence of a source is a pretty good indication of absence. The same thing goes for knights sleeping in their armour and never emerging from their castles without it on. There are also no sources for knights fighting for days, or for them being able to continue without their heads. It's just not true. Blue blood does not, in fact, come from the nobility being sapphire sanguineous slugs, but rather from the Moorish occupation of Spain in the 1700s. Moors originally came from northwest Africa, and so had darker skin than the residents of Spain at the time. Under Moorish occupation, the Spanish grew to hate the Moors' darker skin, and endeavoured to stay out of sunlight as much as possible so that they didn't acquire tans. This resulted in their blue veins becoming much more pronounced. The Spanish nobility's veiny appearance impressed those who saw them, and thus nobles became known as blue bloods. This term has since filtered out across all the English-speaking world and lost its original historical connotations. Also, terribly sorry to disappoint, the Zeteron was a mistaken interpretation of a badly described turtle. A sea creature with a shell morphed into the armoured, quote, Knight of the Sea. So finally, we go back to the statues in the Medici Chapel, and the one from Portugal. What do these statues depict if I have all the answer? The answer is, I don't know. I can just tell you that it's extremely unlikely to have been the true forms of invertebrates occupying metal exoskeletons. There are still mysteries in this world, but the Knights of the Worm Table is not one of them. Was that good? I feel that was good. I think that went well. Sorry to all those who've lost a load of respect for me spouting the crap about dragons and knights and all that. But yeah, it was a fun thought experiment while it lasted, right? Right?